Scotland in 1885 was deep in the throngs of an economic depression. British wars in foreign lands along with the Irish famine had placed a continual tax drain on the British people. Businesses were failing and jobs were scarce.
So many people were immigrating to the States, Canada, and other parts of the British Empire.
On the west coast of Florida, the area known as Sarasota was a part of Manatee County. The area had long been home to Indian tribes and pioneer settlers, families such as the Whitakers, the Webbs, the Knights, and the Tuckers made their homes along the pristine waters of the bay between Hudson Bayou and Philippi Creek. Hearing about the wonders of Florida, a prominent Scotsman named John Selwyn Tate convinced several other wealthy Scots to invest in a 60,000-acre tract in Manatee County. The land was purchased from Henry Diston, sight unseen. Tate was noted for his newspaper writing encouraging immigration to America. He persuaded Scotsman Sir John Gillespie, the Archbishop of Canterbury, and the Dean of Edinburgh to join his venture for a new colony to be founded in Florida. The colony would be a first-class operation and was to be called the Ormiston Colony, so named after an estate of Sir John Gillespie located near Edinburgh. Operating as the Florida Mortgage and Investment Company, the group promised grand opportunities to those who would invest in their 60,000-acre paradise.
To sell this piece of paradise, Mr. Tate created a brochure which promoted the healthiest and most beautiful place on all this earth.
Each purchaser paid £100 sterling for a 40-acre farm and a town lot in the earthly paradise of Sarasota. The contracts were signed, the deal made, and the money paid after the buyers sold virtually all they owned at auction. Among them was the Browning family.
My grandfather and great-grandfather were people of the trades. Some very persuasive gentlemen who had bought land in Sarasota and convinced them that the right place to go was Sarasota, so that's where they headed.
It was late November 1885. The harsh Scottish winter was upon them as they arrived at Glasgow to board the steamer SS Furnesia and set sail for New York. On November 25, 1885, the 68 adults and children boarded the steamer to begin their trip to paradise.
The great ship warped away from the dock into midstream, and its engine started ahead at slow speed. Soon the solid skyline ashore became less as buildings got more scattered and the dry docks appeared. Alex Browning, 19 years old.
The voyage was rough and stormy as they crossed through the freezing climate of the North Sea. Unaccustomed to seafaring, many became ill. One person died on board. After more than 2 weeks at sea, on December 10, 1885, 4 days overdue, the SS Furnesia pulled into port in New York City. Here, the colonists would rest before continuing their journey to paradise.
I felt I had suddenly been projected into a new world. Of course I had. The rush of everyone and everything made an overwhelming impression.
Within a few days, they boarded the steamer State of Texas of the Mallory Line, bound for Fernandina, Florida on the East Coast. After a few days at sea, they began to shed their winter clothes as the temperature grew warmer. Upon reaching Fernandina, they had their first view of the wonders of the tropics.
Never having seen vegetation like this in its wild state appealed to our imagination about parrots and monkeys or savages.
In Fernandina, the sojourners boarded a train for the cross-country trip to Cedar Key on Florida's west coast.
This was a rocky ride, noisy and dusty in the extreme. On the newly laid narrow-gauge railroad tracks, the cars being correspondingly small and uncomfortable.
Upon reaching Cedar Key, their journey was again delayed when they learned that the wharf and buildings in Sarasota, which Tate thought were already built, had not yet been started. After a lengthy delay, the colonists chartered a side-wheel steamer, Governor Safford, to take them to Sarasota. This voyage in December 1885 was the first for any steam vessel to the settlement of Sarasota. From Cedar Key, they traveled along the coast, passing Egmont Key Lighthouse, and finally through Big Pass into Sarasota Bay, where a landing was made at a small temporary wharf.
And when they arrived there, there was exactly one country store, which is a company store, that had, of all things, the only thing left in it was a barrel of crackers. That was the total staples that were available to these colonists coming from the old country.
The Whitakers were here at the time, and some of the Sarasota families took them in and helped them recover from this terrible trip and recover from their bad health that they gained on the trip.
My grandfather and great-grandfather and his family of 5 children ended up staying in a 2-compartment tent right down at the end of Main Street, right on the water.
Our camp stove was only a small kerosene arrangement, only fit to boil water with. But Mother was soon busy at a campfire, making Scotch scones and pancakes, with plenty of tea brought from home.
They adjusted to life as best they could. Lots were drawn to determine where their land would be. Before long, 6 cottages had been built by John Scott and occupied by the colonists, and they began to find their plots of land.
My grandfather, and great-grandfather rather, his lot was to get the property right at the corner of 5 Points in downtown Main Street, which is now Patrick's. In addition, they got 40 acres out east, near Fruitville, which was way out in the country, and there really wasn't even roads to get to it.
Some Scots began to clear their land, but they found it difficult, for they were not used to hoes, grubbing picks, and shovels.
One of the most discouraging events was the weather. It soon snowed, and was the first time that anybody could recall snow in this area.
The natives thought at first the woods were on fire and ashes were being carried by the wind from the fire. It snowed quite a bit, enough to make snowballs.
The company laid out the town. The north-south ways were to be named for fruits: pineapple, lime, mango, and coconut. The east-west streets were numbered consecutively from pineapple and orange. Trees were cleared, Main Street constructed. For some, like Alex Browning, work was to be found as a carpenter. Soon, the DeSoto Hotel and a boarding house were under construction.
My grandfather was an architect. Although young, he had apprenticed a sufficient number of years to be classified as a licensed architect.
But for many of the colonists, life was not what they expected. Mosquitoes, sandflies, fleas, red bugs, and other annoyances led many to go back north and call the colony a failure.
A few of the hot-headed ones decided to call on Mr. Tate with shotguns, but he evidently got wind of it and disappeared one night. He has not been heard from since.
In 1886, a new company manager, John Hamilton Gillespie, son of Sir John Gillespie, had arrived.
When Gillespie got here, he finally began to import labor, a lot of skilled labor, in trying to build his colony up.
And he brought Scotch whiskey, which everybody loved.
Alex Browning and his father were hired to plan and build a new home for Gillespie.
The bayhead was cleared on Block D, where the Miramar Hotel now stands, and the house built on the northwest half of the block. This was the finest residence in the county, had large rooms with high ceilings, detached kitchen with rainwater cistern between, and verandas around 3 sides.
Gillespie was 34 years old. He was educated at Oxford and served with the British military. He was a man of action. He brought with him money and power, and at once had workers improving the main streets and completing construction projects already underway. Businesses and buildings began to unfold. The town wharf was completed, as were several other cottages and buildings. W.F. Knight opened the first drugstore located on Main Street. A livery stable was built. M.C. Jones opened a lumber yard at Lemon and Main Street. Under Gillespie's supervision, the DeSoto Hotel was completed. It stood at the end of the dock as an enticement to wealthy northern visitors to stay in Sarasota and hopefully invest in the fledgling community. It was a grand 3 stories tall and became the site of Sarasota's early social events.
There was a grand ball given to celebrate the opening of this new hotel. Everybody in the county must have been invited. It looked like they were all there that night. John Long and a few others could play the fiddle, accompanied by a guitar to suit most anybody. The round dances was mostly favorite, with an occasional waltz. This lasted till morning, when everybody that was able sang, "Good night, ladies."
Good night, ladies. We're going to leave you now.
This really was the first big social event in Sarasota.
By 1888, Sarasota was beginning to resemble the town promoted by Tate and his Scottish partners. Even so, cattle were often seen on Main Street drinking from an artesian well built for the DeSoto Hotel, later to become known as the Bell Haven. Pipes ran down Main Street from the well to the hotel on Palm Avenue.
On a dark night, it was necessary to carry a lantern if you did not want to fall over an old cow or two lying on the board on the walk. It was like dancing a Highland fling, dodging their messes on the walk each morning.
A black quarters was developed in the Central District called Overtown. The company donated land for a town cemetery. It would be called Rosemary Cemetery, and many of the city's early pioneers are buried there. Local entrepreneurs began running cargo from the Bay to Key West. Pigs, chickens, sweet potatoes, and melons were hauled aboard craft with names like Phantom, Ruby, Florence, and Margaret Ann. Steamers carried passengers and freight from the dock at the DeSoto Hotel to the Tampa Railway Station. By 1893, the nation was heading for an economic depression, and the growth of this paradise on earth, begun by those brave Scots in 1885, had slowed to a standstill.
The building boom stopped, and so did the prosperity. Steamers stopped coming to the town since there was no trade.
There was no enticement for them to stay here. There were no jobs, no industry, no work, nothing to look forward to.
Gillespie thought he had the answer: a railroad. It took 5 years to accomplish this task, and the resulting inaugural trip took place on May 16, 1892. The first train, called the Slow and Wobbly by local residents, ran from the county seat in Bradenton to Sarasota. It was rarely on time, and it only departed when there was a sufficient load. Breakdowns were frequent. The Wobbly train lasted just a few years, but Gillespie and others arranged for another railroad to come to Sarasota. This was the Seaboard Airline Railway, and it made a major difference in the town's development. While most of the original colonists had long since left, Gillespie remained. He was the first mayor when Sarasota was incorporated in 1902 and served 5 consecutive terms. He was justice of the peace and a real estate broker. Besides being an attorney and businessman, J. Hamilton Gillespie was an avid golfer. Gillespie is probably the one man credited with introducing it to the state, possibly the country. Gillespie built a 9-hole course with clubhouse in 1905. It extended from Lynx Avenue eastward to the present Ringling Shopping Center. On September 7, 1923, while playing golf on the 110-acre golf course he had built, Gillespie suffered a heart attack and died a few hours later.
He was buried from the Episcopal Church, where I last saw him, a staid Scotch face, lying still in death, dressed in his captain's uniform, the church filled with mourners who followed his flower-filled hearse to Rosemary Cemetery. May he rest in peace.
Another early pioneer, Arthur B. Edwards, was born in Sarasota in 1874, but he could trace his roots back to the old sod. Orphaned in his early years, Edwards was a successful cattleman who later served as mayor of Sarasota from 1914 to 1915 and again from 1920 to 1921 when Sarasota broke away from Manatee County to become a separate county. His efforts helped pave the roads and build the Tamiami Trail. He was also responsible for building the Edwards Theatre in 1925. While almost all of those early Scottish colonists who had braved the elements to start this city were gone, their influence remained. In the early 20th century, the town began to grow. More businesses were built, and those wealthy Northerners Gillespie had sought were discovering the area. People such as Harry Heigl, Bertha Honoré Palmer, Marie and William Selby, Owen Burns, Calvin Payne, John and Mabel, and Charles Ringling would become important benefactors in the city's growth. Still, the Scots had made an indelible mark upon the fabric of our society. In 1958, a new high school in the southern part of the city was preparing to name their band. Members of the community looked to a way to honor those Scottish forebearers. They named the new band the Kilties.
The JCs raised the funds to buy the original uniforms for the Kiltie band. The band has always taken the field in our McDonald dress, our military dress kilts. The early 60s, pipes were ordered to add to our Scottish tradition. In the early 60s, the Highland Lassies were a majorette corps. Somewhere along the way, they decided that they would learn some of the Scottish steps. We hired Kay Kreiner, and she started the TAMs, which has evolved to become the Highland Dancers.
The Kiltie Band and the Highland Dancers have represented Sarasota throughout the world, bringing acclaim to the band and positive attention to our fair city. In 1986, Sarasota celebrated its centennial with a visit from the Right Honorable Robert Gray, Lord Provost of Glasgow. Members of a Sarasota-based Scottish organization helped plan the event and negotiated a gift from the city of Glasgow to Sarasota.
My wife Jean and I flew over to Scotland and met with the Lord Mayor of Glasgow to see if they would like to make a gift to Sarasota on the occasion of this 100th anniversary. And a month later I got a telephone call and he said, how would you like to have some sandstone from a church that was built the same year that the Scots came over from Glasgow in 1885. We're now tearing that church down. So what you see today then is the base, two sections of one of the four sections of one column, and the Corinthian top. And we think it's rather beautifully done, put together by the Imperator group.
That same year, the Caledonian Club was founded, dedicated to preserving the Scottish heritage of Sarasota. A non-profit Caledonian Club Foundation was created to award scholarships and provide funds for historical and cultural activities related to our Scottish heritage.
Caledonia is the ancient name for Scotland, by the way. So Caledonia is called. So we formed a Caledonian Club here, and the purpose of that Caledonian Club was to bring the history and the culture of the Scots to the forefront here in Sarasota.
The club takes great care to preserve and promote the many tartans and traditional dress of the Scottish clans.
We have 41 tartans and 6 flags that are donated by the members of the Caledonian Club to the Caledonian Club. Most of them are registered with the Registry of Tartans in Scotland, and each one donates an affiliation with that member's particular clan.
I'm wearing the traditional kilt and the jacket. This is called the bonnet. And of course I have down here the skin-doo, which is a dagger that all these Scots used to carry on in warfare days. And of interest, of course, is the sporan. This is a little purse that even back in the earlier centuries when the Scots were in battle, the soldiers would have this. They'd keep little personal items in here.
Sarasota continued to strengthen its Scottish ties when in 1990, the Florida State Center for the Performing Arts, the Oslo Theatre, was searching for a replacement for their small theatre on the Ringling grounds. They found just what they were looking for in Dunfermline, Scotland.
The Dunfermline Opera House was built in 1903, and then it was refurbished in 1921, and then it was called the Hippodrome Opera House of Dunfermline. Very fortunately, the Scottish Arts Council saved the original theatre, which had been scheduled for demolition, and we now enjoy that theatre. All of the pieces that you see in here, the plaster pieces, the proscenium arch, those are all the original things from the Dunfermline Opera House.
The Caledonian Club became involved with the new theatre, sponsoring the lounge on the second floor.
Well, we're standing in the mezzanine of the Performing Arts Center known as the Oslo Theatre, and this was dedicated in 1989, at which time the Caledonian Club provided the funds for the lounge here known as the Caledonian Lounge. And we are very proud of this because we have our tartans here, and by the way, the tartans are changed every month. We put a new set up here.
In 1990, the Caledonian Club arranged with the Sarasota Bradenton Airport for a Scots Heritage display to be located in the main lobby. Items on display included original golf equipment used by the Scots, who brought the game to the area. Airport visitors collecting their baggage are also met with a striking painting by noted artist Frank Hopper. This set includes a scene of our Scottish heritage.
Well, these are all authentic golf clubs of that era. They're made over in Scotland. You can even see the forge mark on the metal golf club from Scotland. That's authentic. I couldn't find a real copy on a clubhouse, so this is an authentic old hotel that existed at that time, and it's the nearest thing to a clubhouse we could find.
In keeping with their mandate of promoting the Scottish heritage in Sarasota, the Caledonian Club also became involved with the refurbishing of the second floor of A.B. Edwards Theatre, now the Sarasota Opera House.
We put in the promenade on this side of the building, the south side of the building. Forever we were able to keep our tartans here on display, and we have these tartans changed frequently, so that everybody's tartan in the Caledonian organization has a chance to share up here on the opera floor.
The Caledonian Club has provided funding for the largest collection of Scottish books in the country. It can be found at the Selby Public Library. The Caledonian Club also sponsors a variety of events such as the annual Thistle Ball, which promotes the traditions of Scotland, from the playing of the pipes to Scottish dancers. The revelers attend in Scottish attire, sporting the tartan of their clan. The preservation of the Scottish heritage by the Caledonian Club in Sarasota has been keenly successful. The club continues to grow. Of course, every self-respecting Scottish club needs an official piper.
The bagpipe has been in existence in Scotland since at least the 11th or 12th century, they figured. Around about the 16th century, they did add a bass drum to the bagpipe. And it wasn't until about 1850 that they put the bagpipe itself into the British Army as a band. Prior to that, they only used 1 or 2 pipers at a time inside the British Army. And from then, the bagpipe band has spread all over the world.
Besides the Caledonian Club, a variety of organizations have been formed to keep alive the Scottish traditions. The Academy of Scottish Arts was founded in the 1990s, providing an outlet for those who want to learn this soul-stirring ancient instrument of the bagpipe. Its members provide entertainment for a variety of events throughout the area. Also founded in the 1990s are the Highland Games, held each year at the Sarasota County Fairgrounds, hosted by the Scottish Heritage Society. Beyond the traditional Highland Games, the event features entertainment, food, and demonstrations of Scottish life. In honor of the 100th anniversary of the 1902 incorporation of Sarasota, held in 2002, the city further strengthened its Scottish ties by forming a sister city relationship with Dunfermline, Scotland.
Dunfermline, Scotland was adopted in 2002 at a special signing ceremony on Van Wezel's stage, exactly on October 14th, which was when the charter of the city of Sarasota was signed.
Out of that signing came the idea that we should have a tartan which would represent both cities, and consequently a new tartan was created. The kilt that I wear at this moment is the new Sarasota tartan. You'll see that it carries the two colors of Sarasota, which are the teal for the beautiful waters that surround Sarasota, and the gold, which of course is the sun that always shines on Sarasota. The blue and the red are the colors of Dunfermline, Scotland, and the white stripe in the new tartan represents all of the sister cities of Sarasota.
On April 6, 2004, members of many Sarasota Scottish organizations came together on National Tartan Day to hold celebrations of that first Scottish landing on our shores. What began as hope for a better life for those early Scottish colonists has indeed proven to come to fruition for those who have followed. Mr. Tate's original pamphlet describing Sarasota as the most beautiful and one of the healthiest locations on earth rings even more true today. And those of us who enjoy the beauty and cultural benefits of this area are forever indebted to that small group of Scottish colonists who braved the unknown, battled the insects and wild animals, and, with the sweat from their Scottish brow, removed the dense thickets of palmettos and vegetation to lay the foundation for what would become this gem on Florida's west coast, this tropical paradise, this Sarasota.